Hey y'all, so today I'm going to be doing a book review on Pet Sematary by Stephen King. This book, I honestly feel like changed me as a person. I know that I've alluded a few times on my channel that, my father died when I was young. I had a grandfather that I was really close to that died right near the same time he did. I don't deal with death or grief very well. And I knew that going into this book. I kind of already knew the story of Pet Sematary because people refer to a lot of Stephen King's books, especially like the Pet Sematary. They refer to The Shining all the time, Carrie, Cujo. They refer to those books a lot just in general passing, outside the bookish realm. Just the general audience refers to these books all the time. So I kind of already knew the basic premise of the story, but reading it through Stephen King's writing is a completely different thing. It really is. Everybody talks about this being the scariest book that King writes, and I always thought that it was the horror aspect of it. And after reading The Shining last year and Pet Sematary this year, it's become clear to me that the horror that Stephen King can bring out in his books isn't from the supernatural things that he's writing about. It wasn't, spoiler, the dead woman in the tub from The Shining. It wasn't, spoiler, the dead cat coming back to life in Pet Sematary. That's not what is horrific in these books. It's much more human than that. And King, in the Pet Sematary, he writes about grief on different levels, different forms that grief can take, and the grief is what makes the story horrific. You get different aspects of it, like I said, and it just, because grief is something that I deal with in a very inefficient way, I don't know how else to put it, it truly affected how I think about some things, and the lengths that people will go to avoid feeling grief, to bring someone or something back that they've lost. And it really is about how much people can truly take before their mind just snaps. And when I was going through all this as a teenager, that's something that I often wondered. I had, and I'm not going to go into it, it's very personal, but I had a lot of very serious traumatic things happen to me in a very close time frame in my life. And I often wondered, how much can I take? How much more can I take? And this book just drew some of those old feelings out of me, and he wrote about them in a very realistic and thought-provoking way that it made me feel seen and made me feel understood. And I don't know if it helped me. I don't think it helped me overcome my grief. That's something that I probably would need professional therapy over. But it's just, I feel like it changed me, and I feel like it did help, even if I'm not completely cured. I don't think anyone is ever cured, and that's part of what he's saying in this book. That's part of the message. Anyway, let's talk more about the book, because I'm just rambling about my personal grief at this point, and that's not helpful. This was my second Stephen King book that I've read, and it's very well done. He does some foreshadowing in this book, and sometimes I feel like it was a bit too heavy-handed. And he's done that he did that in The Shining as well, where it's just a bit too heavy-handed on the foreshadowing, and he's doing it on purpose. I don't think he's not, but I tend to not like that. I didn't like some of the foreshadowing being that heavy-handed. Just coming out and saying, oh, this person's gonna be dead, it just, I don't care for that, but I also understand with what he's writing why he put it that way. He does still have his weird way of saying things, like he says whoopses or blowing his groceries instead of just saying he threw up. It's he sometimes has these weird turns of phrase that when I'm reading them just kind of catch me off guard, and it makes me laugh. Like, who says throwing up is whoopses, or oh, he blew his groceries. It's so weird and random that it actually kind of made me laugh quite a bit. So all in all, this is a really great book, and I'm sure so many other people have read it. But if you haven't, definitely read it. It made me cry. It's definitely worth reading. It's very streamlined. There's not a lot of fat. I don't feel like it droned on. I liked the pacing. Some of his books, like I'm reading The Needful Things now, and it's very thick, so I don't know how I'm going to feel about the pacing in it, but this is a pretty short book for him, and I think it was very well done. It's definitely worth a read, so absolutely pick it up. And stick around for spoilers. So obviously spoilers, you know, everybody practically knows the Pet Sematary story just because it is a work that has been referenced so often. It's kind of like The Shining. I just read The Shining last year. I'd never watched the movie, but I knew the story because I've seen those pictures from the movie so many times, and I've heard the phrases and everything like that, so it's just one of those things. But there are 2 quotes in here that I absolutely love. The first one was, "False modesty is half the sin of pride," and I really liked that quote. The second one I'm actually going to read, but the second one is, "Maybe she'll learn about what death really is, which is where the pain stops and the good memories begin. Not the end of life, but the end of pain." That is a quote that I cried the first time I read it. It hit home for me in more ways than one. And like I said, it's just, this book is not about a dead cat. It's not about a man bringing his dead son back to life. It's about so much more than that, and I'm telling you, the horror doesn't come from the dead people. It just doesn't. It doesn't. So that was my quick review of Pet Sematary by Stephen King. Let me know down in the comments if you've read this book, if it did have any effects on you like it did me. If you haven't read this book, still let me know and tell me maybe why you haven't read it, or if you do plan on reading it in the future. Y'all take care. Bye.